Former Governor Bill Richardson, of course, whose foundation was involved in trying to release Otto Warmbier, of course, on many, many times has worked with the North Koreans, even now, to try to get them to release the 3 Americans still held hostage there and 1 Canadian, I believe. Governor, very good to have you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Neil. Nice to be with you.
Same here. Governor, what is your sense about whether this is a catalyst for change that all these missile tests we've seen out of the North Koreans has not been?
Well, I mean, it shows that North Korea is getting worse, that this treatment of this young man in a coma without disclosing to his family, to the United States government, to the Swedes that represent us, show us there's a crisis of leadership in North Korea. We don't know what makes this guy Kim Jong-un tick. In the past, we could make a deal with a father to get prisoners out.
Right.
They'd use them as bargaining chips. They'd want high-level visits or humanitarian aid. I mean, in this case, this young man could have been violated. He could have been abused. He could have been tortured. We just don't know. The excuse they gave was so flimsy. Botulism and then a sleeping pill. This is a crime against humanity.
You know, what's weird, too, about it is why they released him in the first place. He was sick, obviously. They could have let him die in prison here. So what do you think got into them saying, oh, my gosh, we've got to get him out of here, or he's going to die on our watch? What happened?
Well, precisely that, Neil, that maybe he was showing symptoms of decaying after this coma, with this coma. And I think they realized that they'd made a huge mistake. They notified the U.S. government, the State Department, and I give credit to the State Department and the Trump administration for aggressively going to North Korea, sending a plane, demanding that he be treated in Japan, brought home, but it was too late. And my foundation tried 20 meetings with the North Koreans. They never told us about this. I sent a delegation there to try to get them out in exchange for private humanitarian aid. You know, I've been dealing with the North Koreans for years. I've been there 8 times. This is the worst that I've ever seen. The worst thing they ever did to one human being, one American boy, and a great American family that is heartbroken right now. And I think the nation is heartbroken over what happened to Otto Warmbier.
You know, Secretary and Governor, one of the things that came up today was John McCain responding to this, saying that that young man was murdered and that it would be crazy for Americans to even entertain going to North Korea. I guess 5,000 a year do go there. I don't know what plurality are Americans, but would you agree with his sentiment that it's not a wise thing to do and that they shouldn't expect backup or support from the United States if something bad does happen to them?
Well, I don't think anyone should travel to North Korea. You can travel there. There's no restriction.
Right.
I think the State Department should consider putting a restriction on. I do think that if you're detained, you deserve to be helped by your government. We've got 3 Americans there and 1 Korean that are detained. If the North Koreans were smart, they'd release them all to atone for what they did with Otto as a sign of contrition, a human rights gesture. But they probably won't do it. You know, they use these as bargaining chips. But at the very least, they should disclose what happened. See if we can get a UN investigation in their human rights. I doubt if they'd let them in. But, you know, this should not go without some kind of punishment of some kind. Now, I'm not advocating military strikes or anything, because I think the whole area is a tinderbox, and we've got soldiers there, and I think you resolve this thing with China's help. And China should do more. They're not doing enough.
Yeah, you just touched on it, Governor, and that is frustration that the Chinese have not been able to get this guy off the ledge with the missile test, to say nothing of this latest tragedy, on that maybe they're not trying hard enough. In other words, if people talk about building up sanctions on North Korea, should we expect the Chinese to do more? And if they don't, to get economically tough with the Chinese? What do you think of that?
Well, you know, the Chinese like us to have problems in the Korean Peninsula. They like this turmoil because then they can make their moves geopolitically, militarily, trade-wise.
Well, then do you think that they're stringing the Trump administration along on this promise, we're going to resolve this if you go slow on calling us a currency manipulator and all the other stuff, you know, when the 2 leaders met in Florida?
Well, I thought that was a good strategy of the presidents to try to get them involved in the solution. I think the Chinese have done a little bit more than they have in the past, but not enough. In the end, they have vetoed some resolutions at the UN for more sanctions. They're the ones that need to realize that the turmoil in the region, refugees from North Korea going into China, the missile tests, are something that's against the best interests of China, that geopolitically wants stability in the Korean Peninsula. But no, they haven't done enough. We need to lean on them more. But I wouldn't be terribly optimistic. I've always said North Korea is a land of a lot of bad options to make things better, unfortunately.